Has this ever happened to you? Turns but won't start? Let's dig in.
Okay, the FJ40 can finally leave my shop. So what did I do to this thing? In case you haven't watched any of the other videos, which I don't think I only put but 1 or 2 videos, pulled the body off, remediated a bunch of rust, did a little bit of metal work, hammered out some beat up rockers that I beat up one of them. Front axle swap, so we got disc brakes, so it's a later, this is a 1970 FJ40, this axle came from like a 76. Leaf springs, shocks, obviously brakes, rebuilt the hubs, new drum brake stuff on the back, shoes and wheel cylinders and such, bunch of new brake lines, brake master and booster, and rewired the whole thing front to back. So let's talk about a few of these things. Again, the headlight kit from Toyota, the best headlight kit I think you can get for $40. That blows my mind every time I think about it. You're probably wondering like, oh man, why do you have 2 alternators on here? That one's not hooked up. That's a Toyota alternator with a factory bracket. This is a GM 1-wire alternator with a homemade bracket. This is what was on here when the vehicle came to me. It does work. The only reason I have 2 of them on there is because when we swap to power steering, we're going to remove this because the power steering bracket hangs off these cylinder head bolts and the pump goes right there. And then I'll go ahead and have that alternator in place. So I just got to toss the wires on that side of the engine and put in the voltage regulator, and then we're still rocking and rolling. I already did all the pulley swap out, so we have a double water pump pulley, double groove crank pulley, so all that stuff is going to work. There are some variants of that, so you might have to buy this one and that one. You know, there's the short water pump, a long water pump, and the double groove crank pulleys do have 2 wide grooves, or like a wide groove and a skinny groove, so you can, I guess, do all your homework before you pull the trigger on purchases. I just kind of made it up as I went. And another thing you might run into if you're doing power brakes is the booster. You'll either get a bracket or a spacer between the firewall and the booster, which then you'll need an extended rod going from the pedal to the booster to accommodate this extra space, because this brace is in the way. Some people just cut a window out of that and let the booster go up against the firewall. That's really not a big deal or a bad idea, especially if you can gusset this little brace on top and bottom after you cut it. This one is touching the carburetor, so this little diaphragm here, vacuum chamber, the hose bar where that nipple for it is just right on the master cylinder. So if you actually pull these 4 nuts off to get that master off of the booster, you have to take these 2 screws out to wiggle loose that little vacuum chamber and get it out of the way so you can get the master off of there. So that's kind of a hassle, but the stuff does go together. We'll see how much it vibrates, and because as you rev it, the engine rocks a little bit. We'll see if it's actually going to rub a hole in the rubber hose that's on that barb. You might just have to bend that nipple in a little bit, but everything works now. I did have some problems with the brakes, just getting those threaded rods adjusted. There's a rod inside here that goes from the booster to the master, and of course there's the rod that goes from your pedal to the booster. And Toyota calls for like 1/8 inch of free play in the pedal, which is not much. I also discovered on 1970 and earlier they used obsolete brake fittings. They used 9mm fittings, like on this T, and on those flare nuts are 9mm. So that was a bummer, because I bought a whole bunch of 10mm like for this. So you have 2 options: either clean that stuff real good and make sure it doesn't leak, or hack off the end of the hard line and slip on a new 10mm flared nut and reflare your hard line and stick it back together with a 10mm fitting or T or whatever. I think there's an 11mm on the rear axle, so that's also kind of a hassle. But just cutting off the end of the line and swapping out fittings is kind of the easiest way to get around that. Fortunately, the clutch master and all that worked, so everything works except the biggest headache I had was abandoning the power steering project, because it turns out on a 1970 column shift, the column has nowhere to go when you put the power steering gear on the frame. That incorporates the later model column. So basically, to put power steering on this car, we have to abandon column shift, get a floor shifter, and get a 71 or later column to mate to that. So the owner's just not ready for that project. So for now, we're just hanging out with 2 alternators, manual steering, and column shift, which honestly, this FJ40 is about one of the best manual steering vehicles I've driven. You really don't even need power steering. Even with big ATs, this thing is pretty awesome with manual steering. So my other issue was, after I rewired the whole thing, and I know you Toyota fanboys are like waiting for something to go wrong because I did not use a Toyota wiring harness. It's fine. I wired everything correctly. It's great. It's awesome. It saves a buttload of money. But when I got in and turned the key, nothing. It will not start. Turns out it's not getting spark. Just in the starting position. Which is also a bummer because the owner of the vehicle spent big bucks to get the Davis Unified, which is a GM style HEI. It's just a really nice one, and it's wired correctly. So with the key on and on position or accessory, we get 12 volts to the distributor. But just when you're cranking and the engine is turning, you lose that voltage. And it's wired correctly, so that tells us the culprit is the ignition switch. And that could be the same for, you know, a first-gen Mustang. It could be for a 1990s Lexus LX. I've worked on all that stuff with the same problem. And the easiest thing to do, well, first, the easiest thing to do is put a new ignition switch in there. Sometimes they're, you know, 40 bucks. Sometimes they're way more than that. So if you want the auto parts store $8 fix, a momentary switch. All right, so if I push this button, it momentarily gives 12 volts to the distributor. So basically on the back side of the switch, I have constant 12 volts coming in, and then I have the wire that goes out going to the start position of this ignition switch. So since the switch fails to give 12 volts to the distributor when it's cranking, this switch will force it in there only when I push the button. Even right now, 12 volts at the distributor, 0 volts. But there's another way to wire this thing so we can actually make it push button start instead of having to push the button and turn the key at the same time. So let's take a look here. Let me pull this out of the dash and we'll look at the back side. Okay, so I got my switch pulled out, and I'm going to show you how it's wired in right now versus what we'll try next. So here's my momentary. It's just yellow and white, arbitrarily chosen. Okay, so the red wire is coming into, on this old switch, it's labeled AM for ammeter. So basically just constant 12. The purple is start, the orange is accessory, and the white is ignition, or the pink. So pink goes to the distributor. So when the key is in the on position, it's sending 12 volts to the distributor. Let me adjust my camera a little bit. Okay. And this red wire has 12 volts all the time. Accessory has 12 volts when I turn the key to the left. And start is what sends 12 volts to the starter. So what happens right now, I'm robbing 12 volts from my constant coming into my momentary switch, and when I push this switch, it goes out this white wire So it force feeds 12 volts into where the pink wire is, and that goes to the distributor. So when I'm starting the engine and I don't have 12 volts here on the pink wire, I push that button and magically I have 12 volts there. The other thing I can do is just turn the key in the on position, so we have 12 volts at the distributor, and use the momentary to send 12 volts to the starter, okay, which is going to be this purple wire. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to remove my white wire from the distributor leg and move it over here to the purple wire that goes to the starter, and then I'll put all this stuff back in the dash. We'll just turn the key on and push the button to start it. Okay, I did exactly what I said I was going to do. So now, even with no key in there, we can force feed 12 volts to the starter. So if you've ever driven something like, 1950 Chevrolet, that's how they used to come from the factory. My brother and I used to get in big trouble because we would put it in gear and then scoot the car around the driveway when we were like 10 years old. So this is actually why they stopped doing this, because it is dangerous. If you let your kids into your car and you leave it in gear, they can, drive over things like other children or pets or the house or whatever. But just for demonstration, now we have key on, 12 volts to distributor, and this is our start button. So it's actually going to start if I pump the gas. Give me a sec here. A couple of pumps. Here we go. So it's your choice if you do push button start or have a momentary for starting with a key and sending voltage. It's safer if you're sending voltage while cranking with the key, but this is obviously more convenient. But anyways, now this car is basically ready to go back to the owner and get on the road. Always recommend just driving something, and then you really figure out what else is wrong with it, what's falling apart, what needs immediate attention, what you want to do a year from now. So maybe you'll see this again sometime soon for power steering and cleaning up the inside. Thanks for watching.